All right. Hopefully you can all hear me here and see my screen. So, thank you all for showing up here today. A lot of things going on everywhere. Hopefully, when Rob showed you the demo, we can show you some of the things, at least in some of the ways that Retrospect can actually help you out in this scenario, help you take care of the some of these remote backup situations that you're dealing with now. Obviously all stay safe, and we're always talking and preparing for natural disaster, whether it's earthquakes or whatever else, and it's a virus that it's kind of keeping everything separated now, and we're dealing with a new set of issues, whether it's just communication and getting people set up so they can work remote, and or managing them, and again, just dealing with a situation where it's not a question of, hey, we can just go out there and take care of this quick, maybe you don't have access anymore. So this is Werner, Director of Sales for Retrospect. Rob has actually been Director of Technical Support. We'll be going over a live demo. I just want to go over a couple high level slides for you guys in regards to some of the new remote backup capabilities and needs that Retrospect can help you out with. For those you don't know, again, Retrospect is backup solution. Nice thing is we're with our new centralized management capability and our new onboarding capability. It makes it very simple that as you're trying to add new clients, as you're trying to update or add new end users across the board, we now have this ability to basically push this Retrospect software, whether it's client software or even engines, out to the new end users and stuff as needed. So, like I said, we're not going to do too much on the presentation. Just want to really kind of say that, look, regardless of what it is you need, whether it's a small business, whether it's a home office, whether my brother is a school teacher, where he's now called us this week and going, I've got to use Zoom to figure out how we can teach remotely. A lot of different situations you guys are dealing with. Just know that regardless of the type of size environment, whether it's a very small one or it's a very distributed one, whether you're doing servers or desktops and laptops, Retrospect's gonna have a solution for you to help protect those environments, regardless of whether you're on site or remote. So we got a lot of cool tools, and why it's important. Again, for example, with my brother said, as everything might be centrally located on the most point where they go, well, in the office we got our servers backed up and everything else. Today we're dealing with a lot of remote workers, and with the COVID going on right now, a lot more remote workers than a lot of people are ready for. And so it's very important to make sure that regardless of where the people are sitting, that regardless of where they're adding data, they're updating their collateral, they're trying to run their businesses at this remote thing. Again, you have that one level of just communicating to begin with, make sure they have secure VPNs, or make sure they have ability to all access some centralized storage, but also to make sure that as they're working, that this data is protected. So as things move back to normal, hopefully sooner than later. But again, as these things happen, you're ready and say, look, if something happens, if a laptop goes out, if there's, power failures, whatever it is, that you go, we got this data protected, and you have a solution in place that allows you to restore the data and protect it regardless of where these people are. So very important, when you're dealing with remote ones, again, from a security point of view, the reliability of the internet connections, having that one level to say, well, look, things may go down here and there. Now with even all the extra strain on the internet itself, every now and then we'll get some of these cloud solutions that kind of, my internet failed a couple times and email got jammed up. And again, knowing that you got this data protected, said it's going to just be one less worry off your guys' plate. So again, I only have a few slides here. If you have any questions as we go along, please let me know. If you have, just type them in. We have the Q&A box. Just let us know as we're going here. And again, when Robin's doing his demo as well, just let me know, and I'll get that question over to Robin, and he'll answer anything as we go along as well. So again, just some of the main challenges: making sure you have a reliable internet connection, again, remote system access, and really thinking through a restoration plan. So, how are you going to get the backups taken care of? And you'll see how we're going to make some of those things easier for you. And again, once it is, have you tested these backups to make sure that you can restore them when needed. When things do move, when people start centralizing again, will you be able to take those backups and transfer them again to some back to the main office again? Maybe locally you have a local NAS or RAID array running, but now remotely you need to utilize a cloud-based solution to move this data to. Maybe even local drives, like USB drives, NAS drives, that they have there. Retrospect's new ability to really kind of target the data where it is and manage it from the centralized point of view really allows you a lot of flexibility that says, look, okay, tell me, what we got, well, what's needed, what needs to be protected, and we'll give you the best option in regards to where you can move that data, and we give you a lot of flexibility and options in regards to how you can actually make that happen. So, it's very important to analyze the data, see what's critical, what needs to be backed up. Retrospect has the ability to do full backups. We can also be target specific data. So you're going, look, we may not need to protect these whole OSs, but absolutely we'll have our teachers, we'll have these remote workers, whoever it happens to be, and target specific files on all these machines across the board. So we also save pipeline issues and everything else. So again, a lot of flexibility. Question real quick, is the presentation going to be provided later? So yes, absolutely. We will have a link that we'll be sending out to all you guys that you can download this to share it with other people that weren't able to make it. Again, including the entire demo and everything else. We will have that up and we'll get that up to you guys as soon as possible. And another question is, bare metal restored possible over remote connection, and is it practical? So actually there's some updates coming from Retrospect regarding that, but absolutely, Robin can get more into that. There's ways to create disaster recovery images and ISO images so they can boot up from it. There are new ways to actually have a new update coming out that actually allowed for engine restores, which means, remotely somebody can actually log in and actually do a live restore for Macs. And so there's a lot of capabilities. Robin can get into those questions, great questions. And again, I'll have him respond to that in more detail when he's done here. I got a couple more slides. But thank you, great questions. And again, so to make sure, again, it's very complete, and to make sure that you're testing it, when you're doing your backups to make sure that you go, great, we got the restore. Do we have a report? Retrospect has reporting capabilities. And again, with this new management console, very quickly with a single glance, you can really tell who's been backed up, who hasn't, what looks wrong. To be able to address any situations as they arise from a remote location. Will the new client look for the server, or will server client look for the client as the case is now? Great question. I'll actually show you that in 1 second here real quick. So there's a couple different ways that Retrospect can actually back up these remote clients. One, via a VPN. So you have people that normally work internally, you can actually back them up via VPN. This gives you the ability to utilize a client when they move remote. You connect them into this secure network, and again, we'll back them up and see them out there. When you have other types of remote users that go, maybe we don't have a VPN connection. They're never in the office. Some of us work remote all the time. We have some of our team here. Some are in, Europe, some are back in New York on the East Coast. And, regardless of where we're sitting, we may or may not be in, or we're traveling. And so to be able to back up, although none of us are traveling too much right now, with those, we have the ability now to utilize just from the backup server, by accessing an additional port that allows the clients to be seen regardless of whether they're on a VPN or not. So these are great ones to be able to back them up when VPNs aren't available and accessible. So it basically goes out there and watches for it to show up, and then we can back it up as soon as we see it. And the other way is basically a cloud backup, which means we're putting the engine on these remote ones. We have a solo versions and desktop versions to load onto these remote workstations, desktop, laptops, Mac, Windows, regardless. And be able to go out there and, again, from our centralized management point, say, great, we have these 50 remote machines out there, and we want to create a script to have all these guys back off to this main cloud target. With a public-private key pair that's locked in, so very simply be able to push this out to them. And then from there, it hooks in. It's centrally managed from the main management console. They're all running on a process script, backing up to the target as needed. But again, all that's done with the local engine, and so that way it doesn't need to reach out to the one at all. It basically is just communicating with the management console. And then from there, the engine's able to do its own thing. So there's different ways to go at it. Again, I'll defer some of these over to Robin for additional details as we go. Will Retrospect wake up a sleeping laptop or do a backup on schedule? Absolutely. I kick mine off a lot automatically, but you absolutely can do all sorts of scheduling and have wake on LAN capabilities. And what ports need to be open? Is it Samba protocol? I'll defer that to Robin. Said I know 497 for general clients. There's another one, for, I don't know, 3 something. He'll go over that, but we'll get you all the information. Just so you guys know, with these questions, we'll make sure that we're responding to them now, and any additional details in regards to the specifics around remote backups, how to do the different types. We have all sorts of detailed videos and collateral on our site, and we will send those over to you to make sure you have everything you need to really get these things up and going as quickly as possible. We have also a new proactive, and again, thank you very much for the questions. We have new proactive AI scheduling. One thing that makes Retrospect unique is we have this ability it's a policy-based backup. So instead of saying, well, I want to back up every day between these windows, it just says, I want to back them up once an hour, once a day. And Retrospect's policy-based scheduling will actually go in there, monitor these machines to come in on the network, and with the automatic AI capabilities to actually optimize those backups of the clients regardless of when they're coming in and out of the network. It's basically watching for it, monitoring for it, and backing them up without the intervention of IT person having to go out there and say, oh, I see him, let's go get him right now. So we got a lot of cool capabilities that allow for very simple implementation. And again, from a scheduling point of view, create a general protocol, and Retrospect will follow those protocols. On demand, so when they are backed up remotely, to be able to go in there and actually the end user can actually restore back their own files on demand as well. Again, oh, there's the port actually. See, the port is 22024. So you set that on the main backup server. On the clients, there's a couple little port forwarding things to do for the main, if you want to do it as a remote one and not via a VPN. But again, very simple setup. And again, once that's set up, we'll be able to back them as they come in and out of the network, even without a VPN if needed. Storage groups, this is a feature that when you are backing up these multiple desktops and laptops, the ability to go out there and basically say, look, we know we have 50 of them, 20 of them, 10, 3, whatever, it doesn't matter. And we have this one, we're going to create this cloud target, whether you're creating your own private cloud with like Minio or Bash or React, where you're creating your own S3 target, or you're utilizing Amazon or Google, Backblaze, Wasabi, one of the public clouds, to be able to say, great, we got this nice volume sitting out here. We're going to log in the credentials with Retrospect, and then very quickly go out there, create this storage group to say, we got all 50 of these guys that want to be backed up, and move it to the same target over here. And Retrospect will monitor for those, again, with those proactive scheduling, to very simply manage all that for you. And again, back them up as soon as it sees it. Again, just taking that management level off of you guys. So with our new management console, we now have this centralized console that allows you to, send out scripts, set out schedules, to monitor activities as it goes on. Robin will be showing all of those to you in just a minute. Again, so it really allows you to, instead of having to watch for, well, did the email report come in or did everything else, very quickly to take a look at one dashboard, say, here's all your customers, your client machines, whatever it is you're trying to back up, and have all those aggregate into this one management console to very simply be able to get detailed and organizational drill down, to be able to drill down all the different, whether it's different companies, if you're, actually one of the IT guys, if you're an end user right now, again, to if you have 20 different laptops that need to be backed up with remote people, someone like, again, my brother sitting out there trying to figure out, how to run Zoom in general. So they say, well, don't worry, we'll push this out, click on this, lock it up, and we'll get you started backing up. So whatever you're doing, whatever new plans you got going, whatever you're updating on your laptop, we got that data protected. It's one thing that's off your plate. So again, Robin's going to show you this, but very simply, it's to auto onboard now with our new Retrospect capability. So with this management console, with this centralized management, we now have the ability to auto onboard these guys, which means you basically create an organization, you add the license, you download the license installer, and you start backing up. So very simple setup, very simple protocols. Robin's going to actually show you in just 1 second here. And again, I'm going to get you over to the demo. So any questions that we have as we go along? Couple question here. Can you address 2 concerns regarding remote backup and how remote addresses these? Firewall and bandwidth, resource saturation, how it can keep managed. Actually, Robin, if you can toggle over at this point to yours, and that way I think Robin can address this. So basically, how Retrospect address these: firewall, bandwidth, resource saturation, how we can keep resources managed, so remote backups don't slam the firewall or the connection, and defending against external threats against the backup server that has IP and ports exposed to the public for remote backup support. So security, how do we deal with these remote security issues?
Right.
Backing up remote clients.
So I think everyone should be able to see my screen at this point.
Yes.
Okay, so to answer the question really about, when you're doing remote backup, your biggest issue is going to be bandwidth, mostly because if you have, let's say, a user that's working from home, your bandwidth is going to be limited by the upload speed of that user, because that user is uploading their data over the internet to your office network server. And so if a user is on a slow VPN connection, that's going to give a slow backup. If the user has a fast Comcast cable internet connection that does fast uploads, they're going to get a faster upload speed for that backup data. But keep in mind, if these users have been working from home for a long period of, or if the users have been working from the office for a long period of time, a lot of their data may already be backed up, and so you're not doing everything over the internet. Yeah, my throat's already getting dry. So in terms of, let's walk through the demo, and I think that may help also answer some of the questions related to how Retrospect does this and how security sort of works and that sort of thing. And I know that, and so we'll talk about it, and like I said, maybe it'll answer some of those questions as we go. So the first thing that you're looking at with remote backup is the way it essentially works is you've got a backup server in your office, and that backup server can identify or find computers on the internet and then pull the data from those machines over the internet to your backup server and your backup server's storage device. And once it's configured, it's fairly seamless. And so what we're going to talk about today is the configuration and how to set it up. And then as we get through it, I'll start jumping into some of the questions and that sort of thing. So the first thing is that inside of Retrospect, we're going to assume that we're working with a machine that does not yet have a Retrospect client. And I'm doing that because a lot of you have not used Retrospect before, while some of you have used Retrospect before. So I'm going to make the assumption you have not used a Retrospect client or don't have the client installed. And then after that, we'll take a step back and we can look at what you would do if you already have an existing client. So the first thing you would do with a new configuration is inside Retrospect, whether you're on Windows or Mac, you go into the preferences, and under the client section, there's an option for creating keys. This is a password that is essentially embedded into the Retrospect client installer, and it allows you to install the Retrospect client seamlessly or let an end user install a client without you having to do anything special. So I just do create keys, and I have to enter in a password of some sort that you as the administrator is setting up. Oops, I need to make a longer key. Hold on. See if I can type this right. Okay, So Retrospect is going through and it's creating these keys, and creates what's called a pubkey.dat file and a privkey.dat file. And those files are the privkey.dat always stays on the backup server, doesn't go anywhere. And then you've got the pub key, which is what you would use for the client installation process. So just to show it real quick, and like I said, you have this on both Mac and Windows, just in different folders. Inside the program data folder, I've got a Retrospect folder, and then we can see that there is now a pubkey.dat and a privkey.dat file. Now, this gets into what we call the onboarding process, or creating of an installer that you can use for all of your users. So I'm going to bring up a web browser, and the web browser is at console.retrospect.com. So you would create an account at console.retrospect.com if you don't already. And this is the Retrospect Management Console interface. And from inside the console.retrospect.com with Retrospect 17, I'm going over to Settings. I'm going to go to Organizations. And I've got a few in here already, but essentially what you would be doing is using this option over here that says Backup Server. And I'm going to add a backup server to Retrospect. And I'm going to call this Remote Backup Demo. I'm going to say Save. And the next thing I need to do is provide the website with my Retrospect license code. So in my case, if I go back to Retrospect and I go to Configure Licenses, I can see my, I can see my license codes. And I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to say Add License. I'm going to enter in my license code. And now Retrospect has created this onboarding environment that is customized to me. And I can deploy a Retrospect engine or a Retrospect server. And this is great if you're working with what we call the Retrospect Solo product. And we can talk about that just briefly in a few moments. But then there's this button down here that says Upload Public Keys. And this is where I tell the website to utilize the pubkey.dat file that I generated under the Preferences window. So I'm going to go to Upload pubkey.dat. And on the Macintosh, it's under Library, Application Support, Retrospect. And I happen to already have the key file there. And so I'm just going to choose the pubkey.dat file. I'm going to open it, and I'm going to upload it to the website.
A quick question, Robin.
Yes.
It says I'm connecting over a VPN that isn't handing out static IP address. So every time I connect, my LAN IP changes. Is there a way to have Retrospect look for a client over a range of IP addresses?
Yeah, we can look at that in a few minutes. We can sort of do that, and so we'll look at that in just a moment. Because the VPN is a whole different method of doing remote backups, and so I don't want to confuse everybody by combining the two concepts. So now that I've uploaded this pubkey.dat file to the website, the next thing I have to do is get an IP address. And what I'm going to be entering here is the IP address of the backup server's network. And this allows the client to call home or phone home. Because essentially, once you've installed a client on a client machine, it phones home to the backup server network and says, hey, I'm out here and I'm available for backup. And so I have to enter an IP address for that. And in my case, I did some looking a little while ago, and I tried to track down my IP address, and I actually put it in the wrong spot, but this is my IP address, and I'm just going to copy it, or try and copy it. And I'm just going to go ahead and enter it over here. That's the IP address of my network, and I'm going to say save. So once I've entered this information, I can go over here to the bottom as I scroll down and click Open a New Window. Now what this is doing is it's giving me now an installer for Mac, Windows, or Linux that has the pubkey.dat file embedded in it, and it has that IP address of the Office network embedded into the installer also. And I can take the IP address, the URL up here, and I can email this URL to every single person in my office. And once I've emailed that URL to everyone in the office, or now that they're working from home, they can then download the installer that's appropriate for their platform and run that installer. And then that will get the Retrospect client installed on their machine. And that'll put the client in a state where it's waiting to get added to a backup server, or so it's waiting to be included in a future backup. Now, if I go back to my backup server, and I go back to preferences, and I go to adding over here, there's a little box over here that says automatically add clients. And I want to make sure I turn that on. And once I enable that option, then the clients that have been installed using the pubkey.dat file and the server IP address, once those clients get installed, they're going to phone home to the backup server, and then the backup server is going to automatically add those clients. And they're going to appear in a group called automatically added clients. So any client that gets detected by the backup server will get dumped into this little folder here called automatically added clients. And then all you need to do on the backup server side is create a proactive backup script. So under automate, I can go to proactive backup and I say new, and I can call this my remote machines. My source is going to be that group. So if I go down here to clients, I've got this group for automatically added clients. And I think, if I'm thinking about it right, there's automatically added clients, and I think we actually create a folder called remote clients, if I remember right. Yeah, I think we do. I think we add an additional folder called remote clients. So let's just, for the sake of, since I'm not doing it, and I'm not doing remote backup myself right now, we'll just create called remote clients.
A couple questions,
so,
Robin. Sorry, are admin credentials required to install the client?
Say that again?
Are there admin credentials required to install the client?
The client needs to be installed while the user is logged in as an administrator. So if the user is logged in as a workstation user, they may not be able to run the installer. It has to be installed, with admin permissions.
Okay.
So that is a good question.
Oh, and then another question, sorry, it looked like, I'm not sure if this was totally answered yet, sorry. Said, so with a firewall question, said, can we throttle each client? Say we have 100 meg connection and 50, laptops, it'll saturate the office.
I'd be surprised if it truly saturated your office. You're only going to be able to run up to 16 executions simultaneously. I guess it depends on the pipe you have in the office, how big that pipe is. And in terms of throttling, there's a couple of things. There's that's for cloud. I don't think we specifically have added that, but let me show one option that might be helpful.
Especially if the gigs have gig fiber, so they can. Yeah,
let me show one option as we go through this. So in any case, we've got our proactive script. Our sources can be these groups where you've got remote clients that were automatically added or machines that were generally automatically added. And I can even add other machines. It doesn't have to be, if the machine was already previously configured with Retrospect, I can include those in the script also. The key is that if you want them to get backed up when they're remote and physically out of the office, they have to be in a proactive backup script. And they have to have that server address that we talked about. And we'll talk about it added to existing clients.
So I think you just answered one of the questions. Well, what if they're already connected to the backup?
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll show that in a second. So we'll just go ahead and we're going to pick a destination. Here's a storage group that I've already got. It could be an existing backup set or a new backup set. And then in terms of that throttling option, the closest thing that we have right now is under the preferences. There is an option here for a speed threshold and a performance threshold, where if a backup performance is too slow, then we can drop the connection and skip that machine, or not even attempt to back up a machine. So if you do have an end user at home and they have just an ultra slow DSL line or something, or they're, in, a very remote location that, is maybe using satellite internet or something, who knows? You may want to set up a speed threshold in here, and then that will prevent Retrospect from trying to back up that user over the internet and sucking up, unnecessary utilization. But right now, we don't have anything that completely throttles the backup operation. It's something that we're considering for the future, and we probably will add it. So in any case, you have to use a proactive backup script. Once you've configured the proactive backup script with clients that have been installed using the onboarding, web console, or machines that were previously installed, then Retrospect what will happen is those clients themselves will phone home to the office, tell the proactive backup script that it's available for backup, and then proactive backup will start grabbing those machines. Now, if you have an existing client that's already been installed, you need to open the Retrospect client, whether it's on Mac or Windows, and I'll bring up the Mac client over here. Whether you're on Mac or Windows, what you need to do is go to this Advanced tab, and you need to provide the IP address of the Office network. It's not the IP address of the backup server, unless the backup server happens to have a routable IP address. But it'd be the IP address of the Office network, basically. And you would enter it, inside of, whether you're on Mac or whether you're on Windows, you enter it, in the Advanced tab. And once you've done that, then that client will ping that IP address. And if you've opened up the port 497 on through port forwarding, and I'll just bring this up over here, port 497 and this 22024, as long as you've got those ports open on the Office network, and they're not being blocked by firewall software on the client machine itself, then the client will be able to call home. The backup server should detect it. We should be able to see it through the proactive backup script, and then the proactive backup script will start pulling down the data. Now, the question came in about IP ranges and things like that. Inside configure clients, when you're adding a client, just in general, just a client on your Office network, by default, there's two different methods of adding clients. Multicast, which only looks for machines in the local Office subnet, or subnet broadcast. And this sort of goes where the VPN comes in. With subnet broadcast, you can add specific subnets you want Retrospect to look for clients on. So let's say the VPN has its own subnet, and I don't know what that would be, but let's say it's 168.5.0, and then 255.255.255.0. If the VPN has its own subnet, then you want to add that subnet to subnet broadcast. And then once you've added the clients, added the subnet broadcast, and let's say you've got your building 1, building 2, building 3, and your VPN, and they've all been added over here to subnet broadcast, then you want to make sure that you've added the client using subnet broadcast. So as an example, if I take a client and I go here to properties and I go to the access tab, right now it shows that this client was added using multicast. That means that client's only going to be detected when it's in the local subnet. But if I want that client to be detected over VPN, which is in a different subnet, I probably want to change this, go over here, go to subnet broadcast, and then add your clients or re-add your clients or reselect your clients using the subnet broadcast method. And then once you've added a client or reconfigured the client with subnet broadcast, Retrospect is going to scan all of the noted subnets for that client. So if the machine is in the local office in their regular subnet, it'll find it. If they're in the VPN subnet because they're connected through outside of the office, then it'll find through the VPN subnet because you've added subnet broadcast, and the client is configured with subnet broadcast. So just keep in mind, if you go here to the Access tab, and the Access tab shows the access method as multicast, it's only going to look in the local subnet for the machine. But if you've configured it with subnet broadcast, and I don't even think I've got one here set up that way. Yeah, maybe I can do, what's my subnet? Let me just go back over here and let me just do one real quick. I'm going to go to add, and add, I'm going to go here. I'm going to pick a client and just add this machine real quick. And Werner, do we have questions that I can answer while I'm waiting?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the first one here, you may be going over some of that out. Can you use dynamic DNS value server than a IP?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. It supports DHCP. So,
Okay.
you know, if you're using multicast or using subnet broadcast, they both work over DHCP. And the same would go if the user is, you know, connected through VPN, they're going to be assigned an address. Now, if your VPN only passes limited amounts of traffic, maybe only specific, traffic, then it may not work. You may need to configure your VPN to also pass retrospect traffic or port 497 traffic. Otherwise, the VPN is just going to be ignored and it's not going to be seen. So what is my IP address? My IP address right now is 10.0.0.21. So let me add over here to subnet broadcast that subnet. So it's 10.0.0.21 is my IP address. And I typed that wrong, 10.0.0.21, and it's 255.255.255.0. So now I've got that subnet in there also. And see, magically, once I added that subnet, all these machines started showing up. So if I added this client through multicast and I want to change it, I go over to change, I go to subnet broadcast, and I just reselect the machine over subnet broadcast. And now whenever that machine gets backed up, it can, Retrospect will scan all of the subnets I've added through subnet broadcast. Now, if I'm doing remote backup and I'm not worrying about any of that stuff, then the remote backup is going to take over. In the remote backup, we're just going to find it on the internet because that machine is broadcasting itself to the remote, to the IP address of the network that I configured over here under the advanced tab.
All right, we have a lot more questions here. So this probably goes to storage groups, but do we want a separate destination for each computer?
No, you should not. I would not recommend doing that. That's the whole point of a storage group. When you go to, and we'll just create a storage group real quick so you can see it. I'll go to configure backup sets and create new. And this is going to be true for whether cloud or disk. There's a little box over here that says create a storage group. But when you create a storage group, then Retrospect will back up all the data to a single backup set, but it tracks them all separately. And this is an example of a storage group. I can see that it created all these little subcatalogs for each disk that I back up, whether they're local disks or whether they're client disks. It creates their own little subcatalogs for all of these and tracks it all separately and allows you to run simultaneous backup operations. And so you can run as many as 16 simultaneous operations to a single destination storage group inside your proactive backup script.
One of our partners commented just said any decent firewall will allow you to throttle a given port as long as we know what port it uses. So that's a great.
So port 497 in that case, yeah.
And can I add the public IP with command line?
Not really. The public IP. Oh, there is one way to do that IP address. There's a server.txt file that you can create. And let me just bring up this article real quick. Everyone can look at this. I believe the URL that you care about is retrospect.com/remote backup. So if I just go over here and put that in, retrospect.com/remote backup, it gives all of the directions that we're talking about, including some setup videos. And there's a server.txt file that you can create and put it in a specific folder, and I know it's outlined in here somewhere. And once you put that file in the specific directory, then that will populate the IP address into the advanced tab. So if you don't want to open up, here it is right here, we talked about it here. So if you don't want to, go to every single machine and type in the IP address in that advanced tab, create one of these server.txt files, and if you have the ability to distribute that file into the correct path, then that will just populate the file for you, and then the machine can start broadcasting to the backup server.
And let's see, I use a subnet broadcast as best practices anyways. Also, VPN clients typically don't allow traffic back the other direction sometimes. So, comment. Let's see, a long question here. You want me to have more than one proactive AI script using remote backup running in parallel if you can't back it all up all remote backup clients with the desired frequency and with the same time frame they are accessible on the backup server. Let's assume that.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good points. You can have as many proactive backup scripts you want, and you could have one script for all of your fast remote clients, and you could have a proactive backup script for all your slow remote clients, and you can set the schedule of how often they get backed up, and the frequency and the rotation by having multiple destinations. You can configure all of that through multiple scripts and just really do it the way you need to do it.
Let's see, when adding a local client via multicast, I can see the source, try to add it, then get error 519, no client found at this address. The machines are on the same network right next to each other. What am I doing wrong? Well,
519 is a network communication failure of some sort. Something's preventing the traffic from going back and forth. The first thing I typically look at is firewall stuff. When I get a 519 error, sometimes a firewall can even slam down and block a connection after it's started. You want to make sure that port 497 is open for both TCP and UDP on public and private networks. Basically, incoming and outgoing traffic need to be open on port 497 for UDP and TCP. And if you can go to configure clients, add, and then do the test, and enter the IP address of the machine and it finds it, then that means that port 497 is open for TCP, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's open for UDP.
Let's see. Can you change an existing backup disk to storage groups?
No, you cannot convert an existing backup to storage group. But what you could do is you could go to tools and then do a transfer backup set. And you could make your source your old backup set and your destination one of these storage groups. And you can copy the entire contents of your existing backup set into a storage group backup set. And then when you're all done and everything's been transferred, you could purge out the old backup set. And then start utilizing the storage group that you created through this transfer. And so you could do transfer backup sets or transfer snapshots, and then get that data transferred into a storage group. Now there's one other part of remote backup that we didn't talk about that I want to cover real briefly, and then we can go back to questions. And that is we have a product called Retrospect Solo. When you have the existing Retrospect configuration that we've been talking about, all the data is being pulled over the internet, going to the backup server, and then the backup server is writing it to the backup device. And that backup device might be the cloud, or the backup device might be a RAID or a tape drive or whatever you decided to use. If you have the Retrospect Solo product, that is a scaled down version of Retrospect that you can install in every single one of your end users, and they can then do direct backups to their own USB hard drive, or they can do a backup to a cloud that you may have previously designated. And the Retrospect onboarding functionality allows you to set that up essentially. You can have, through the organization stuff, you can do the onboarding assistant, enter license codes, and even create backup scripts that you configure for all of the machines that you're managing through the Retrospect Management Console. And then configure all of those to go to the cloud. But then they're going directly from that user's installation of the Retrospect software to the cloud. But it's a little more involved because it's not centralized managed. It's sort of centralized managed through the management console, but not completely. It gives the users a little more autonomy and a little more access. And I usually reserve it for the more advanced users. But it is another option.
Question, maybe this was already covered, but is the remote client communication encrypted over the WAN if the encrypted network box is ticked in the client preferences?
Yeah, we're going to encrypt the data is being encrypted. We're not sending clear user data across the internet when you're doing that. That's the whole point of the public-private key thing that also allows us to do encryption. But I would definitely turn on the link encrypt option. So under the configure clients, when you go over here, there's this option that says encrypt network link. I would recommend turning that on. That's a smart thing to do.
So, and just a question, it said that yes, with the auto onboarding and stuff like this, I said we have the management console with the ability, basically that we have a free version that comes with all the different versions, 17, We have a paid one, which is what allows you to aggregate it. Again, it's partners and users, especially right now in these times. If it's, we never try to have any sort of cost issues across the board in regards to Retrospect. But if you ever have issues, say, look, we kind of need this right now, and we're also dealing with budget issues, whatever, reach out to the sales team, let us know, and we'll work on all that with you. So don't worry. Sorry.
What other questions are we missing? Are we missing any questions, Werner?
It looks like one other. When a remote client is backing up, especially with laptops, the user isn't really aware the backup is backing up, and they're close to their laptop or shut it off. The backup stops, and when Retrospect console fails, the backup usually sees that 519 error. Sometimes the backups will say the script is in use and will not back up again until Retrospect console is completely closed and reopened. You can't modify script device backup until the console is closed.
Yeah. I hear. I get where you're going with that. There's definitely situations where a machine may disconnect from the backup in the middle of a backup and then confuse things. We have right now we're on Retrospect 17.0. We're going to be doing a 17.01, I think is the version that will be out in a week or 2 weeks. And that version not only has some bug fixes for remote backup, it adds some new functionality. Allowing the users to initiate restores differently, allows the backup server to initiate restores. We are working to improve those sorts of timeouts that can occur when connections drop. One user recently reported that connection seems to get left open for them at least. After remote backup completes, and we're fixing that in this point rev that's coming up, that sort of thing. And I do remember a question came up earlier about doing disaster recovery. I would not do a full DR over the internet. That's probably not going to work because you can't. It might work over VPN, but it's not going to work through the remote capability because you're booting a machine from a temporary operating system. Through the WinPE disk. You can definitely restore individual files and folders, entire folders, but I would not do disaster recovery over the internet.
And what if they're restoring actually running the engine on those remote clients still?
What's that? I missed the.
If they're running the actual solo version or desktop.
Yeah, I mean, if they're running a solo version, they're doing a backup to a storage device that they mostly control because they're going to be their USB hard drive, or it might be a cloud that the office configured for them or something. And if they're doing that, then there's no reason why they can't go. They should definitely go into disaster recovery, create the bootable recovery disk, or have the office create a universal recovery disk. Provide it to them, and if a solo user went down, they can boot from that recovery disk and then perform a disaster recovery.
Cool. So
but it may be too advanced for an end user to do. It may require the help of you guys in IT.
Okay. It says when you said across VPN, is this VPN offices bonded together, or is it possible to say with Cisco, Meraki, client VPN, etc.?
I'm not a VPN expert, so I really can't give you a strong answer about that. I know that if you're using a true VPN between offices, where you're connecting to your office specifically over the VPN, then that should work as long as the VPN isn't blocking the port 497 traffic. I've even had customers complain that the user's on VPN and Proactive Backup finds them and starts backing them up when they don't want to get backed up over VPN. So I've actually had customers complain that it gets annoying to them, that they're doing VPN-based backups when they really don't want to. But that also goes right back to this whole throttling thing. When we look at the Proactive Backup script and we go into the options and we go down here to client, that's where you may want to set these speed thresholds, because if you know that they're going to be on VPN and you don't want to back up over VPN, then you can tell it to set one of these values to skip a machine if the connection is too slow.
Real quick, what has to happen for to backup clients that are already out in the field? They're going to need this through MDM or pushing out the configs or plist for Macs. What?
I missed the very beginning of that, Werner.
So basically, if you already have the clients set up, and what do you need to do to happen? What needs to happen to backup clients to get this set up for ones that are already set up in the field.
Yeah, I mean, but like I said, it's essentially as simple as it's sort of like two steps. You open up the Retrospect client on the client machine, and you make sure that you add the IP address, the public server IP address. And then once you've added that, and we're talking about machines that have already been previously configured with Retrospect, then you need to put that machine in a proactive backup script. Once that machine's in a proactive backup script and it's got that IP address, then the client should be able to find the backup server. The only thing that I think will get in the way is if you added that client using the direct IP method. If you added the client using a fixed IP address, I think that becomes a problem. But if you added that client using their multicast or subnet broadcast, as long as the client has that IP address of the backup server network, and you've opened up the network, the firewall for port forwarding, and you have put them in a proactive backup script, you should be good. If the user is in a traditional regular backup script, remote backup is not going to work. Okay, remote backup is going to fail if the machine is in a traditional backup script. The other thing that you won't be able to do with remote backup machines, if the machine is outside of the physical network and they're in a remote environment and you go to properties, you won't be able to use like this refresh button over here. The refresh button is going to fail because it's forcing the backup server to look for the client, when in reality, remote backup works by the client notifying the backup server that it's available. It's same with the volumes tab. If I go to this volumes tab and I click this volumes tab on a remote client, it's likely going to fail because the backup server is querying the client instead of the client querying the backup server.
How about backing up to direct cloud targets?
If you're using the remote backup capability, the client itself can't go directly to the cloud. That's where you need to consider the Retrospect Solo product, because the Retrospect Solo product is installed on their machine and it can be configured to go to the cloud. And through the Retrospect Management Console, you as an administrator can set up scripts to the cloud that go to that user. And so if I bring up, where is it? If I go over here to this thing, and I can go over here to machines, I can see all of my, these would be, let's say, all the Retrospect Solo installations that I have. And I'll just scroll down here. I've got my test system, and I can go here to, where do I want it? Let me find the option because I'm not thinking right. Let me go over here to settings, and I'm going to go to scripts, and here's the machines that I previously configured. And I can go in and I can go there, and I can create a script, and then I can then push that script out to all my Retrospect Solo installations. So I can tell what kinds of sources I want to back up. I can do a new destination, and that new destination can be Amazon S3 or Backblaze compatible. And I enter in the credentials, and then I push that stuff out to my Retrospect Solo installation. And then that Solo installation will then start writing to the cloud.
Let's see, another one. One, just to do a quick follow-up. The other one said, he said he was, in regards to the Meraki client VPN, he just said, I'm, at home with a static IP and use Meraki client VPN to reach the headquarters. So there's a little follow-up on that. And he wants to pull backups of his server at the office into his home.
Yeah, if you want to pull the data from the server into your home, you could. A VPN is probably an ideal solution like that. But what you would have to do is basically reverse everything we've talked about. You would have the Retrospect client also installed in your backup server, which we don't usually recommend. But you would have to have basically a Retrospect client installed in your backup server. You'd have to have a Retrospect server installation installed at home, which would require a Retrospect server license, probably. And then you would have to configure the client with in the advanced tab with the IP address of your home network, so that you can pull the data from the client, to your home network. And so, yeah, it could be done, but it's reversing a lot of what we talked about. While a VPN connection might be better if you're dealing with, only one machine that you're trying to get, protected to your home network.
Can you show how to set up a subnet broadcast on the Mac version?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me bring up the Mac real quick. I go to Preferences over here, and under Preferences, I go to Clients, or excuse me, go to Network, get my mouse going, Network, and then I go to down here. I have this section over here with subnet addresses, and I enter in the subnet address and the subnet mask. And so once I've added all my subnets, and these are just, random, made up subnets, once I've added them, when I go to Sources on the far side of Retrospect and I go to Add, I get this drop-down menu over here for either multicast or subnet broadcast. And so I would add these clients either using the multicast or subnet broadcast. If I have an existing client that I added using multicast and I want to change that client to subnet broadcast, then I would do is I would go to the sources list, choose that client, click this locate button, and then reselect the computer using the access method that I want to use. And then once I've reselected that machine using the access method, then it will change it. And I can see down here in the summary tab which interface it's using, whether it's using the subnet interface or whether it's using the subnet broadcast. It's going to appear down here in the summary tab.
Awesome. Can users perform a self-restore when backing up directly to cloud storage?
Not right now. There's actually, well, if you're talking about Retrospect client users, right now a Retrospect client, if I go to configure preferences, I go to configure preferences, and then I go to clients, allow clients to, let's see, backup on demand. Let me take that back. The backup on demand is limited to disk sets. Restore on demand should work from a cloud, now that I think about it. So yeah, if you as an administrator is backing up to the cloud directly and the user wants to initiate a restore, then that will work. But the data is going to it's going to cache through the backup server, and then the backup server is going to push it out to that client machine as part of the restore. They're not going to go directly from the cloud to the client. In general, I don't like to see clients backing up directly to the cloud. My own personal preference is to back up the client machines to a local disk set and then use a backup set transfer tool to transfer those local disk backups out to the cloud for you. That way you're not tying up a client machine for the length of time it takes to do a cloud-based backup. Because cloud transfers take a lot longer because of the bandwidth. So you could back up a workstation on your network to a local disk set, and then, once a week or on weekends or whatever, you can then schedule a transfer and transfer that cloud backup from the local disk backups out to the cloud. That tends to be a little more efficient.
Do you have to have Retrospect 17 to do remote backups?
No, Retrospect 16 will do it, but we've made bug fixes in version 17, and the onboarding stuff we talked about, where you're creating a universal installer with the server, if we go back over here to organizations, and we look at the onboarding stuff we talked about earlier, where you were seeing the this page where you're creating the embedded installer with the pubkey.dat file and the server IP address. Those things are version 17 specific. So if you want the ability to create these universal things, then you're going to use the version 17.
Just another question, said not related to remote, but says they have one client that they can adjust the number of tasks with no issue. Another one will only allow 2 no matter how many times they try to change it. Is that some sort of limitation? Is it maybe a desktop thing versus whatever?
What was that limitation?
Okay, sorry, last question. So again, they have one client and they can adjust the number of running tasks with no issue. They have another one where they can only do 2 tasks.
Oh, maybe they're talking about the execution units.
Yes.
So under whether you're on Mac or Windows, whether it's execution units or activity threads, it is based very much on the amount of RAM you have. You can see I've only got 4 available because of the amount of RAM I have. If you want 16 execution units, you need to have a minimum of 16 gigs of RAM on the backup server. 16 is, like I said, is truly the minimum for 16 executions. More would be better. If you only have, let's say, 4 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM, I think you're going to be limited to 4 executions. And it may let you change the value in the preferences, but it won't stick. It won't stick because of the amount of RAM you have. So I might be able to change this to 16 and click OK. I don't get 16 executions because Retrospect knows I don't got that much RAM. And so we're reverted back to 4. And so that's really what's going on.
Let's see. If you say backing up an in-house server with 6 terabytes of data, will it slow down users connected to that server if they're working on that server during the day?
16 terabytes is a lot of data, and really the slowdowns you're going to see are going to be based on how much data is being pushed and the performance. The faster the backups are going, probably the more you're going to notice performance hits. If you've got a beefy server, and the beefy server's just got a lot of, got tons of RAM and, lots of I/O capability, you're probably not going to see, much in terms of performance hits. I do prefer to have Retrospect running on a dedicated machine rather than running on the file server itself. If you're going to run it on the file server itself, you're better off doing backups at night. You're going to have less open files running, and you're going to have, less performance hits. Retrospect can utilize multiple network adapters. So if you have multiple network adapters, that might be another way to reduce the bandwidth. Werner, we're already at an hour here, and I know that we only scheduled this for a half hour. I don't want to be rude to the people that are here. So maybe let's pick 1 or 2 more questions if there are any.
Okay, yeah, I'll fire a few. Brandon, you had about future product ideas, and yeah, I'll talk to you about that later because that's been mentioned to us before. And does Sol have any limitation on what cloud services it can't connect to? We have a list of supported cloud clients. So I will get that list to you in regards to all supported ones.
And you can go to retrospect.com, go to support. Under support, go over here to the knowledge base, and then click on this cloud link here, and this is a listing of the cloud services that are supported.
Is the direct client with solo install covered in the article online?
I don't know if it is, honestly. What you may want to look at is there's a couple of things. We've just upgraded or updated the user's guide, and so you'll want to look at. I'm going to go to support again. I'm going to go to documentation, and we'll just go to the user's guide. And there's a section in the user's guide on management console, Retrospect management console. And this is where you're going to you can go through, learn about onboarding, learn about configuring the management console. And then these things will apply to the Solo product in terms of integrating the scripting and pushing out scripts to a Solo installation and that sort of thing.
Perfect. I think that cleared through all of them here. Again, if you have any other questions, you guys, email. You can do na-sales@retrospect.com or sales@retrospect.com. Any more that you want for Robin or whatever, just let us know. We'll definitely go through answering questions. Again, we're always available. That's the important thing with all this going on. Hopefully you got a lot here. We'll send out the link to make sure you have this. We have other video tutorials, all that online as well. So again, whatever we can do to help you guys out, let us know. And, appreciate you guys taking time. Appreciate all the great questions. Robin, thank you so much for doing this. And said another thanks, Robin, for you. I said, we're doing our best again. As you guys have additional features or questions or again, whatever it is, again, the important thing is we're here. We're literally right now going nowhere. So
and look for that release in a couple of weeks. If you're already running Retrospect 17, look for the release in a couple of weeks, which will include the additional remote backup capability and some bug fixes as well.
Yep. And so we'll get this link out to you as soon as it's available, so you can again share it and so that everybody stay safe, stay separated, and thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.